Nice to see you.
Thank you very much for being here. Are you actually a little nervous?
I am so bloody nervous.
Really?
Ah, come on. You got nothing to be nervous about.
That's right.
I'm nervous.
You have nothing to be nervous about. Why would you be nervous?
Well, because you've been ripping on me for, 7 years.
For decades, the world thought they knew Lisa Marie Presley, the heir to a king, the Princess of Graceland. But in her final haunting days, as her body grew frail and her voice went quiet, she was in the middle of telling her own story. A truth, far more tragic and harrowing than any tabloid headline had ever guessed. The world saw a life of unbelievable privilege, but the reality was a private torment of addiction, staggering loss, and a pain so deep it physically broke her. This is the story of what she finally revealed. Lisa Marie Presley was born into a world few could ever imagine. As the only child of the king of rock and roll, Elvis Presley, she was American royalty. Her life started in the eye of a hurricane of fame, a gilded cage where every move was watched and every flaw magnified. From the moment she was born on February 1st, 1968, she was a public figure, a living legacy walking in the colossal shadow of her father. The world saw a fairy tale, the private jets, the sprawling Graceland estate as her personal playground, and the doting superstar father who named his prized plane after her. But behind the gates of Graceland, a different story was unfolding, a story of profound loneliness and of a young girl who would lose her father at just 9 years old, an event that became the first of many devastating losses. In an essay she penned shortly before her own death, she wrote, "I've dealt with death, grief, and loss since the age of 9 years old. I've had more than anyone's fair share of it in my lifetime, and somehow I've made it this far." Her last public appearance at the Golden Globes in 2023 was alarming. On the red carpet, she seemed unsteady, leaning on a friend for support, her speech slow and deliberate. Interviewer Billy Bush later recalled thinking, "Something's off here." He was right. She wasn't just grieving. She was exhausted from a lifelong battle. Days later, she was gone. While the official cause of death was a small bowel obstruction from a past surgery, her eldest daughter, Riley Keough, put it more plainly, saying that while her mother physically died from the surgery's after effects, we all knew she died of a broken heart. For years, rumors followed Lisa Marie, whispers of instability, struggles with her legacy, and turbulent relationships. But the truth she began to share in her own words, through a book she wouldn't live to finish, was more devastating than anyone conceived. Today, we're uncovering the secrets Lisa Marie Presley carried, the burdens she shouldered, and the final, heartbreaking story that changes everything we thought we knew. To understand Lisa Marie, you have to understand the sheer weight of her name. She wasn't just a celebrity's daughter. She was the sole heir to an icon who became a cultural deity. This was the world she was born into, a world of surreal privilege and suffocating expectations. Then, at just 9 years old, that world imploded. She was at Graceland when her father died. The day she lost her dad, she inherited his kingdom, and all the pressure that came with it. The world expected her to be a perfect copy, to preserve his memory flawlessly. When she pursued her own career in music, the comparisons were immediate and often brutal. Her 2003 debut album, To Whom It May Concern, was a success, but she could never fully escape the narrative. She was always, first and foremost, Elvis's daughter, but she inherited more than just fame. She inherited a legacy of pain, a generational cycle of trauma and addiction. Her father's battle with prescription drugs was a well-documented tragedy. This history was a dark undercurrent in the Presley family, an inheritance Lisa Marie was acutely aware of. This burden wasn't just emotional, it was financial. While Graceland became a massive tourist attraction, managing the complex estate was a monumental task. Over the years, she found herself in financial trouble and legal battles, a stark contrast to the public image of infinite wealth. In fact, some reports at the time of her death suggested her net worth was negative, a result of mismanagement and costly legal fights, especially her final divorce. The fairy tale princess was, in reality, fighting to stay afloat. This constant pressure created a foundation of stress that would plague her for her entire life, a weight that would eventually become too heavy to bear alone. The legal battles that followed her death only highlighted the complexity of the estate. A dispute arose between her mother, Priscilla, and her daughter, Riley Keough, over control of the trust. Ultimately, the courts affirmed Lisa Marie's wishes, naming Riley the sole trustee, preserving the line of succession, but not before a period of painful public family conflict. If the Presley legacy was the cage, her relationships were often the attempts to find someone who understood its bizarre reality. Every romantic choice she made was dissected under the harshest of public microscopes, fueling a narrative of instability. Her first marriage to musician Danny Keough was perhaps the most enduring relationship of her life. They married young, had 2 children, Riley and Benjamin, and remained incredibly close even after their divorce. Danny was a constant anchor, and he was with her in the end, performing CPR when she collapsed. Just 20 days after their divorce, she stunned the world by marrying Michael Jackson. The union of the king of pop and the princess of rock and roll seemed like a publicity stunt to a cynical public. But for them, it was a connection over a shared experience of a stolen childhood, of a level of fame so immense it was completely alienating. Lisa Marie felt a powerful urge to save the fragile, wounded man she saw, but the relationship was too intense and ultimately unsustainable. His increasing reliance on prescription drugs was a pattern she knew all too well. Her next marriage, to actor Nicolas Cage, was just as headline-grabbing. A scion of the famous Coppola family, he was another person who might understand her world. Their relationship was a whirlwind of passion and volatility, lasting only 108 days. Her fourth and final marriage was to her guitarist and music producer, Michael Lockwood. They had twin daughters, Finley and Harper, in 2008, and for a time, she seemed to find peace. But it was the complications following the C-section birth of her twins that triggered the darkest chapter of her life. To manage the pain, doctors prescribed her opioids, a routine medical decision that for Lisa Marie became a catastrophic turning point. This was the beginning of the devastating secret she would carry for years. The marriage eventually dissolved into a bitter and protracted divorce, draining her emotionally and financially while she was simultaneously fighting a spiraling addiction that had taken root years earlier. Of all the tragedies that defined Lisa Marie's life, nothing compared to the event she said detonated and destroyed her world. On July 12, 2020, her son, Benjamin Keough, died by suicide at the age of 27. For Lisa Marie, this was the shattering of her soul. The bond with Benjamin was profound. He was her only son, a quiet young man who bore an uncanny resemblance to his famous grandfather. Benjamin's death sent Lisa Marie into a spiral of grief from which she would never truly recover. In an essay for National Grief Awareness Day, she wrote with harrowing honesty, "Grief is something you will have to carry with you for the rest of your life. You do not get over it. You do not move on, period." She battled an endless loop of self-blame, a punishing guilt she said was the hardest part to live with. Her sole focus became her 3 daughters. "I keep going for my girls," she wrote. "It's a real choice to keep going, one that I have to make every single day." The shocking depth of her devastation, however, was revealed in her posthumous memoir. In the book, completed by her daughter Riley, it's disclosed that Lisa Marie, unable to part with her son, kept Benjamin's body at her home for 2 months after his death. This wasn't a macabre act. It was the desperate action of a mother so shattered she could not bear the finality of burial. As Riley explained it, she was just being a mom. It was a haunting, heartbreaking portrait of a mother's love and a grief, so immense it defied all convention. The loss of Benjamin wasn't just another tragedy. It was the final, unbearable blow that amplified every other struggle and fueled the addiction that had been her secret companion for years. For years, the tabloids painted Lisa Marie as troubled. They were seeing the symptoms. The root cause was a secret she finally admitted to in the years before her death. Her first direct public admission came in the foreword she wrote for Harry Nelson's 2019 book, The United States of Opioids. She spoke directly to the reader, acknowledging the tragic irony given her father's history. "You may read this and wonder how, after losing people close to me, I also fell prey to opioids," she wrote. She then laid out the origin of her nightmare. It wasn't a rock and roll cliché. It began in a hospital. "I was recovering after the birth of my daughters, Vivienne and Finley, when a doctor prescribed me opioids for pain," she revealed. "It only took a short-term prescription for me to feel the need to keep taking them." That was in 2008. For over a decade, she waged a silent war. But it wasn't until her posthumous memoir, From Here to the Great Unknown, that the terrifying scale of her addiction was revealed. In the taped recordings she made for the book, she admitted the drugs were no longer about getting high. They were about survival. She described a horrifying daily ritual simply to function. One drug to numb the pain, another to counteract the sedative effects so she could get out of bed. Her body predictably began to break down. She went to rehab multiple times, trying desperately to get clean. The unimaginable grief following her son Benjamin's death, however, turned a chronic struggle into an uncontrollable inferno. Her admission wasn't for shock value. It was an attempt to erase the stigma and show that addiction can happen to anyone. In her foreword, she wrote with urgency, "I am grateful to be alive today, and to have 4 beautiful children who are my everything and my reason for being." Her final act, through the words she left behind, was to pull back the curtain on the secret that had tormented the last decade of her life. Lisa Marie Presley's life was a symphony of contradictions. She was the heir to a king who lived with a pauper's share of peace, surrounded by adoring fans, yet feeling profoundly alone. She lived a life of extraordinary privilege that was defined by unimaginable pain. Her final admission that she was fighting a severe opioid addiction born from medical necessity and fueled by grief was not a confession of weakness. It was an act of profound strength. It was her final attempt to reclaim her own narrative, to replace the tabloid caricature with the complex, wounded, but fiercely fighting human being she truly was. Her honesty recontextualizes everything. The unsteady appearances and quiet. Retreats weren't signs of a troubled celebrity. They were the battle scars of a woman fighting for her life. Her daughter, Riley Keough, said Lisa Marie died of a broken heart, and it's hard to argue otherwise. The official cause of death points to a physical ailment, but her spirit had been worn down by a lifetime of loss. She left this world in the process of telling her own story, a story of survival, a mother's unending love, and the devastating cost of a legacy she never asked for. Lisa Marie Presley's greatest legacy may not be the music she made or the name she carried, but the harrowing truth she finally had the courage to share.